And now to Paris Schutz and members of Illinois' congressional delegation. Paris.
Brandis, there's 71 days left in the Trump administration, and there's also a lame duck session in Congress before the new Congress is sworn in January 3rd. But most Republicans are not congratulating President-elect Joe Biden. In fact, here's what Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said today, and then Biden's reaction.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration.
So far, there is no evidence of any of the assertions made by the President or Secretary of State Pompeo.
And joining us tonight to talk about the election, the future of Obamacare, and the possibility of a new stimulus package are Congresswoman Schakowsky, a Democrat representing Illinois' 9th District, which includes parts of Chicago's north side and northern suburbs, Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat who represents Illinois' 5th District, which includes some of the north side of Chicago as well as other parts of Cook and DuPage counties, and Congressman Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat representing Illinois' 8th District, which includes Elgin, Schaumburg, and Addison. We invited every Republican member of the Illinois congressional delegation to participate in tonight's discussion. They all declined our invitation. We are glad to have you three back on Chicago tonight. First, Congressman Quigley, you heard the statement from Secretary Pompeo. You've seen only a smattering of Republicans acknowledge the Biden victory. Are you concerned that the Trump administration, through whatever maneuver, is not going to give up power come January 20th?
Well, eventually they're going to give up power. The Secret Service will escort them out, and the Department of Defense has already said they wouldn't interfere because President Trump is no longer the commander-in-chief. But I'm very concerned that in the meantime we don't have a peaceful transfer of power, and that creates a great deal of trouble for issues like the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, the State Department, our government finances. How this process transitions is absolutely critical. And it's worked for the 43 presidents prior to this president, and the Republicans have to step up, do the right thing, and tell the president it's time to go.
Certainly an unprecedented situation right now. Congresswoman Schakowsky, also today you have the president, well, late yesterday, firing his defense secretary and getting rid of many of the top level aides at the Pentagon and replacing them with loyalists. What does that tell you?
Well, I think that does potentially create a national security problem for us. Why would he fire somebody with just a few days until his term is over? I hope it doesn't bode that he has some other plans that the secretary would not go along with. So I think that is a very worrisome sign. And the president is clearly living in this fantasy world right now, exchanging chief members of his cabinet and denying 100% that this race is over. And now we have to get to the business of a real transition. And I am just afraid that we're going to be more divided than ever. But I do have faith that Joe Biden is going to be able finally to pull us together.
Congressman Krishnamoorthi, what about the national security threat to all those changes at the top of the Pentagon and other sort of maneuverings at top-level cabinet positions right now?
I'm very concerned. One of the weaknesses that the 9/11 Commission found with regard to our national security apparatus was there was a poor transition between the Bill Clinton and the George W. Bush presidencies with regard to a lot of intelligence gathering and collection and analysis. We don't want anything close to that happening now, and that's why it's so important that, for instance, Joe Biden be given the presidential daily brief, which every other president, including Donald Trump, was given during his transition to power. The message that the American people sent loud and clear on November 3rd is unify, come together under Joe Biden, and tackle the problems that confront all of us together right now.
And Biden today expressing confidence that it's okay. He's not reading the presidential daily briefing yet because there's one president at a time. Congressman Quigley, what about the Republicans' argument that, well, media organizations projected a winner, but the results have not been certified, and the president does reserve the right to put forth any challenges that they see fit?
Sure. 4 years ago, quite the opposite took place. I mean, the president won 4 years ago because of the electoral college differences in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, a difference of about 78,000 votes. I suspect Mrs. Clinton could have, Secretary Clinton could have challenged that, but she elected not to because it was still clear that the voters had decided. There is absolutely no one of reason who doesn't believe that that's going to change. The irony is that President Biden is going to win with about the exact same number of electoral votes, about 306. The way votes are counted now, a recount's not going to change anything. The former governor of Wisconsin acknowledged the same. So this isn't just poor sportsmanship. This is horrible government. It sends a terrible message to the public. It sends a terrible message to the rest of the world that we can't function properly as a democracy.
And you know, there, in Washington, chattering in newspapers, there's a lot of speculation as to why Congress people are reacting this way, failing to recognize the results of the election. Congresswoman Schakowsky, do you believe it's because there are Republicans that know how much power that President Trump has in the Republican Party and they can't risk offending that base, or do they really believe that results could be overturned?
I can't believe that my colleagues think that this is going to be overturned. No, I think that they are afraid of their own constituents and that the president continues with this misinformation, and they are just worried that they will be vulnerable the next time. I think it's shameful. They, too, will go down in history along with Donald Trump as heading up the most shameful, lying, I'm not going to do all the adjectives, you can add your own, administration. But it's really dangerous. It is not good for our democracy to continue to do that. And shame on them for siding with him.
Certainly putting a lot of things in limbo for the American public. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, Biden did win the presidential race, but the Senate did not. Senate Democrats didn't do as well as they expected. House Democrats are poised to lose a few seats but keep their majority. Is there any sort of post-mortem as to why the night didn't go better for Democrats in the House and Senate?
I'm going to let others do the post-mortem. The message that I got, I represent a suburban district, almost all suburban, except for the runways of O'Hare. Mike has the terminals. But we'll talk about gerrymandering another time. But the message I got from my voters, the 72% who voted for me, was you got to unify, come together, get something done, make sure that we tackle the health crisis, which has cost 220,000 Americans their lives, tackle the economic crisis where 12 million Americans remain unemployed, including a lot in my district, which is a hub for retail, hospitality, the airline industry, and so forth. And then let's try to unify on issues of racial equity and equality. These are pressing matters, and we need to come together and get behind Joe Biden and the healing process that he has begun.
And one of the things that folks would like to see progress on is any more stimulus relief for COVID. We're going to talk about that in a sec when we come back. But for now, our thanks to Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, Congressman Mike Quigley, and Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi. Again, we invited Republican members of the Illinois delegation, but none were able to join us this evening. But again, we thank you for being here.
Georgia on our mind.
And we will hear more from these members of Congress later in the program to discuss the status of the next stimulus package. And we're back with three members of the Illinois congressional delegation to talk about the status of the next stimulus package. Joining us again are Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, a Democrat who serves in congressional leadership as the Senior Chief Deputy Whip, Congressman Mike Quigley, a Democrat who serves on the Appropriations and Intelligence Committees, and Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat who serves as an Assistant Whip and sits on the Oversight and Intelligence committees. Again, we invited all the Republican members of the Illinois delegation, but they declined our invitation tonight. And again, we're happy that you three Congress folks join us tonight. Let's talk about COVID relief. Congressman Quigley, is there a package that could be negotiated with the Senate that would pass in lame duck?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, Mitch McConnell says that it should be the first thing on the agenda, springing into action about, what, 6 months after the House Democrats passed a pretty comprehensive bill, and then as an attempt to compromise, passed HEROES 2, coming down $1 trillion. So it's about time, if he finally means it. Clearly there's a deal to be done, if only to get us into the next administration.
Congresswoman Schakowsky, would a deal involve money for municipalities like Chicago and Illinois and transit agencies that say they desperately need the money right now?
That's certainly on the agenda of Speaker Pelosi, saying that we need state and local help. But so far, we have not heard that either from the White House or from Mitch McConnell. And I just want to tell you that it is just desperate out there. And I get calls too often from constituents, men and women, who are weeping into the telephone because they can't pay the rent. They can't put food on the table. So there's a desperate need for a recovery bill to actually pass. And so far, we've heard there is interest from the White House and from Mitch McConnell, and I hope we're going to get to be on the same page.
And all this comes as COVID reaches its worst peak yet. In the winter here, cases continuing to spiral out of control. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, there is some light at the end of the tunnel with a vaccine trial for Pfizer saying that their trial was 90% effective. How soon do you think a vaccine would be available to the public, and then how would it be distributed out to the public?
What we're hearing is that potentially there might be some fraction of the number that's needed to vaccinate the entire population, possibly ready by the winter time, assuming that these vaccines are proved to be safe and effective. That's extremely important, by the way, that there be a transparent process to verify that. Otherwise, the American people won't take the vaccine. With regard to how it's going to be distributed, I think that's something that's very high on the agenda for Joe Biden. He has to make sure that it's distributed fairly, that we make sure that we distribute it to communities of color and others who are vulnerable populations right now, along with our first responders and health professionals who are going to be dealing with people on the front lines. And then we have to make sure that we encourage in a massive public relations campaign that everybody get vaccinated, because there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy right now. Not only anti-vaxxers who already existed before the pandemic, but quite frankly, people who are just concerned that Donald Trump and others politicize the process and need to be reassured that a new sheriff is in town, there's new management, and we're going to make sure that this is safe and effective when it gets delivered to the American people.
A lot of uncertainty there. Congresswoman Schakowsky, today in the Supreme Court there were oral arguments heard in the case to overthrow the Affordable Care Act. It sounded from the statements made by some conservative justices that they might be receptive to keeping it. Is that the way you're reading it?
Well, first of all, the president, of course, would be absolutely furious because he is determined to undo the Affordable Care Act. But what you said is absolutely true. Even from Kavanaugh and from the Chief Justice, there seemed to be some support for keeping the Affordable Care Act pretty much intact. And so we're going to have to wait and see. But let's hope for the best, because there would be literally millions and millions of Americans that would not have protection for pre-existing condition, actually about 130 million Americans, and millions of others that would be suffering from the loss of the Affordable Care Act. The president just wants to do away with anything that Barack Obama did, regardless of its consequence for the American people.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Our thanks to Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, Congressman Mike Quigley, and Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paris.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.